It started on an ordinary Tuesday night, one of those calm, unremarkable evenings where nothing seemed out of place. The sun had long dipped behind the horizon, leaving behind the quiet hum of streetlights and the occasional passing car. Officer Brad Daniels was patrolling the outer edge of the city, where gated communities met country roads. He was known on the force for being efficient, aggressive, and unapologetically hard on anyone he didn't think belonged. And in his eyes, that list was long. When a black SUV rolled past with tinted windows and an out-of-state plate, Daniels flipped on his lights without hesitation. He didn't stop to wonder who was behind the wheel. He didn't care. To him, it was routine, just another traffic stop. But what wasn't routine was the man he pulled over. Inside that SUV sat Marcus Reed. Calm, collected, impeccably dressed, and unknown to Daniels, the newly appointed police chief of the very city he patrolled. Marcus wasn't speeding. He hadn't broken any laws. But none of that mattered to Officer Daniels. His assumptions led the way. What followed was a display of arrogance and deeply rooted bias. Daniels approached the car with his hand already near his holster, barking commands without justification, treating Reed as if he were a criminal before a single word had been exchanged. Reed, ever composed, complied quietly, even as Daniels forced him to step out, patted him down, and demanded identification with the air of someone asserting dominance rather than enforcing the law. What Daniels failed to notice, or simply didn't care about, was the small gold badge clipped inside Reed's jacket. A badge that bore the seal of the city and the title, Chief of Police. That night, Marcus Reed didn't protest. He didn't shout. He didn't flash the badge or pull rank. He let the encounter unfold while the dashcam on Daniels' cruiser captured every second of it. The next morning, the police department buzzed with rumors. Everyone had heard a new chief was being sworn in, but no one expected the storm that was about to hit. At precisely 9 a.m., the department gathered in the briefing room. Officers sat straight, curious, some skeptical. Brad Daniels strolled in late, wearing his usual smirk. He had no idea. And then, the doors opened, and Chief Marcus Reed stepped to the front of the room. The shift in atmosphere was instant. Reed's presence was powerful but not boastful. He addressed the department with grace, professionalism, and an unmistakable authority. And then, without raising his voice, he played the dashcam footage. The room fell silent. Every officer watched as one of their own aggressively confronted the man now standing before them as their superior. They saw the casual disrespect, the unnecessary force, and the disturbing comfort with which Daniels had humiliated a man whose only crime was driving while black. When the video ended, Reed turned to the room and calmly stated that under his leadership, this department would change. Not tomorrow. Not next year. Now. Daniels was suspended by noon. And within days, a full internal review exposed a troubling pattern in his record. Multiple complaints of excessive force, profiling, and misconduct, all swept under the rug until now. What followed was a complete unraveling. Daniels had built a career on intimidation and unchecked power. But that power vanished in a moment. And now, the man he had tried to belittle held the authority to clean up the very corruption that had enabled officers like him. For Reed, the incident wasn't about revenge. It was about exposing a deeper truth. That racism in uniform is a rot that spreads unless confronted head-on. And that leadership requires more than a badge. It requires integrity. Over the next several weeks, Reed initiated reforms that would ripple through the city: bodycam mandates, community liaison programs, and zero tolerance for abuse of power. Officers who resisted found themselves quickly replaced. Those who believed in the mission stood taller than ever before. But what of Daniels? He disappeared from public view after being fired. Rumors swirled that he'd left the city, that he blamed the system, that he refused to take accountability. But one night, several months later, something unexpected happened. At a community town hall hosted by Chief Reed, a figure stood quietly at the back of the room. He didn't speak. He didn't approach the microphone. But he listened. It was Brad Daniels. Older now in appearance, worn down not by time, but by truth. No longer wearing a badge. No longer hiding behind a title. He watched as Marcus Reed fielded questions from children, embraced grieving mothers, and laid out plans to rebuild trust between police and the community. Daniels saw something he had never understood before: respect not demanded, but earned. He stayed until the end. As the room emptied, he stood frozen in place. No one noticed him. No one recognized him. And for the first time in his life, Brad Daniels felt what it truly meant to be on the outside looking in, not just of a department, but of an ideal he had never lived up to. Reed walked past him without acknowledgement, not out of spite, but because some lessons don't need words. That night, Daniels didn't sleep, because regret has a weight all its own, heavier than handcuffs, deeper than any jail cell, and it follows you long after the lights stop flashing.